As the sun began to rise, 5 friends climbed into an old van that had never let them down. They were excited and hopeful, ready to leave their busy lives behind for a while. There was Lily, who loved nature and noticed beautiful things others missed. Marcus, who kept everyone smiling with his relaxed jokes. Ethan, the quiet one who watched everything closely. Sarah, bursting with energy that rubbed off on everyone, and Olivia, thoughtful and careful, always planning ahead. They all wanted the same thing: peace away from phones, traffic, and deadlines. They drove away from the city, its honking cars and crowded streets fading behind them. The road ahead led through open countryside. Through the van windows, they watched the world change. Gray buildings turned to green fields, then to thick forests. They laughed, shared stories, and pointed out deer in meadows or birds swooping over rivers. The air smelled cleaner, and the only sounds were the van's engine and the wind rushing past. Their goal was a quiet camping spot, hidden deep in an old, untouched forest. People said it was one of the most peaceful places around. As they got closer, the trees grew taller and closer together, blocking the sun in places. The friends grew quieter, feeling a mix of awe and excitement. They were entering a place where nature ruled, where time seemed to move slower, and the only clock was the sun crossing the sky. The van rolled down narrow dirt roads, passing trickling streams and patches of sunlight breaking through the leaves. For the first time in months, none of them checked their phones. They were exactly where they wanted to be, together, unplugged, and on the edge of an adventure. When they arrived at the forest, it was very quiet. The trees seemed to be whispering to each other. The campsite was in a clearing surrounded by big oak and pine trees. A small creek ran nearby, making a gentle gurgling sound that mixed with the rustling of leaves and the far-off call of a woodpecker. The friends set up their tents on a soft green carpet of moss. They built a small campfire, enjoying the peacefulness of the forest after the noise and stress of their city lives. The air was cool and fresh, smelling slightly of pine trees and earth. Even though the setting was beautiful and peaceful, there was a tiny feeling of mystery in the air. It was as if the forest, which was very old and wise, was hiding secrets that would only be revealed at night. However, the friends reassured each other with smiles and jokes, feeling happy and relaxed in their new surroundings. As they settled in, they started to feel connected to the natural world. They listened to the sounds of the forest, watched the trees sway in the wind, and felt the cool breeze on their skin. It was a magical place, full of wonder and surprise, and the friends were excited to explore it further. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest transformed into a mysterious and eerie place. The twilight hour brought an unsettling silence, and the trees morphed into dark, foreboding silhouettes that seemed to loom over the group. The darkness itself seemed to whisper secrets, weaving a spell of intrigue and unease around the friends. The group huddled around the campfire, sharing stories and dreams beneath a celestial canvas of twinkling stars. The flickering flames cast a warm golden glow on their faces, but their merriment was short-lived. A strange, unsettling sound pierced the night air, catching their attention and making them pause. It was a slow, deliberate, rustling noise that seemed to emanate from a distant part of the forest. The sound was unlike any animal they knew, and its steady rhythm sent a shiver down their spines. Lily's gaze drifted towards the dark line of trees, her eyes straining to locate the source of the sound. Suddenly, she spotted a faint movement, a shadow darting behind a thick tree trunk. The brief glimpse sparked a chill within her, one that had nothing to do with the cool night air. It was as if she had caught a glimpse of something that didn't want to be seen. The friends exchanged uncertain glances, their faces reflecting a mix of confusion and concern. They attempted to brush off the strange occurrence as a trick of the light or the wind, but the seed of unease had already been planted in their minds. As they settled in for the night, their dreams were haunted by visions of unseen eyes, watching them from the darkness beyond the campfire's warm glow. The feeling of being observed lingered, casting a shadow over their peaceful evening in the forest. It was as if the forest itself was watching them, waiting to see what they would do next. The next morning, the group woke up to a puzzling surprise. Some of their food and water had mysteriously disappeared from the tent entrance. This was strange, because they had carefully arranged their supplies the night before. At first, they thought maybe an animal had sneaked into their camp and taken the food, but when they looked closely, they saw that the remaining supplies were still neatly arranged. This made them wonder if an animal would really take some food and leave the rest organized. Marcus had an idea. He thought maybe a mythical creature from the forest, one that locals talked about in stories, was playing tricks on them. This creature was said to be mischievous and liked to surprise visitors. However, as the day went on, everything else seemed normal. They didn't see any signs of animals or anyone else messing with their things. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the forest seemed peaceful. Despite the beautiful surroundings, the group couldn't shake off the feeling that something strange was going on. It was as if the forest was testing them, seeing how they would react to the mysterious disappearance. The group tried to stay positive and focus on their adventure, but the vanishing supplies had planted a small seed of doubt in their minds. They wondered what other surprises the forest might have in store for them. Were they really alone in the forest? Was something or someone watching them? These questions lingered in their minds, making them feel a bit uneasy. That night, the wind began to blow gently, and the fire crackled loudly, sending sparks flying upwards. As the group sat around the campfire, they started to hear faint whispers. At first, the whispers were extremely soft, and it was hard to tell if they were really hearing voices or just the natural sounds of the forest, like leaves rustling in the wind. However, as the night wore on, the whispers became clearer and louder. They started to sound like human voices, but the words were not fully formed, and it was hard to make out what was being said. It was as if someone was trying to speak, but their voice was barely audible, like they were whispering from a great distance. Olivia was the first to clearly hear the whispers. She was very sensitive to subtle sounds and felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized that the whispers were real. "It sounds like someone is trying to speak from inside the trees," she whispered, looking nervously at the dark tree silhouettes surrounding their camp. The others listened carefully, their hearts beating faster in the growing silence. The whispers were not scary or comforting. They were just a steady, quiet murmur, like a gentle stream flowing through the forest. It was as if someone or something was present, but not visible, watching them from the shadows. The group felt a sense of unease, wondering who or what could be making these whispers. They looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. The whispers continued, a constant reminder that they were not alone in the forest, and that something mysterious and unseen was lurking just out of sight. On the third day, the group decided to explore deeper into the forest. They followed trails marked on their map, which promised beautiful and hidden clearings and breathtaking views. However, as they walked further, things got confusing. Landmarks like specific trees or rocks disappeared. Paths seemed to shift and change, like the forest was rearranging itself. Markers were hidden by overgrown plants, and a strange, fog-like mist settled over the forest. This mist made it hard to see, and it glowed with an otherworldly light. As they walked through the mist, they felt disoriented. The forest seemed to be changing, and they couldn't keep track of their surroundings. Ethan tried to retrace their steps, but the path behind them was different. Trees seemed to have shifted, and markers were gone. The group's happy chatter turned to anxious silence. They looked at each other nervously, wondering what was happening. Every direction led to more trees and shadows. It was like the forest trapped them in its ancient, mysterious world. Their adventure and excitement turned to fear and worry. They were lost, with no idea how to find their way back. The forest, once beautiful and inviting, now seemed dark and menacing. The group stood frozen, unsure what to do next. The mist swirled around them, making it hard to see or think clearly. They knew they had to find a way out, but the forest seemed determined to keep them there. As the first light of dawn broke through the thick leaves of the forest, the friends gathered their courage and started searching for a way out again. The morning was quiet, with only the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. As they walked along the trail, they noticed something strange. A series of deep footprints in the soft earth. The footprints were spaced apart, suggesting that whatever made them was heavy. and had a slow, deliberate gait. Sarah's voice shook as she pointed to a particularly large set of footprints that seemed to lead off the main path. "I'm sure I saw someone or something," she whispered. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her voice trembled with uncertainty. The shadows, stretched out by the rising sun, looked like a figure standing silently behind a group of birch trees. The friends realized that they were not alone in the forest. This thought sent a chill down their spines, making them feel cold and scared. They felt like they were being watched, and the footprints seemed to prove it. The group stood still, looking at the footprints and the shadows. They didn't know what to do next. Should they follow the footprints or stay on the main path? They were scared, but they knew they had to keep moving to find a way out of the forest. They looked at each other, trying to gather their courage and make a decision. But as they stood there, the silence seemed to grow thicker, and the shadows seemed to deepen, making it harder for them to move while searching for clues to guide them out of the forest. The group came across an old, broken-down cabin. The cabin was covered in thick vines and had been left untouched for many years. Its wooden walls were worn out and had scars, telling the story of a long-forgotten past. Inside the cabin, they found old photographs, letters that were yellowed and brittle with age, and a journal. The journal told a local legend, a story about a spirit that protected the forest. According to the legend, this spirit had been bound to the forest for centuries. The journal also told the story of earlier travelers who had ventured too deeply into the forest. These travelers had disturbed an ancient presence, a powerful force that had been sleeping in the forest. The spirit had punished them for it, making sure they never left the forest. The journal said that the forest was alive and had a consciousness, a kind of awareness that demanded respect. The forest was not just a collection of trees and plants. It was a living being that could think and feel. The journal warned that anyone who trespassed into the forest's sacred grounds would be punished. The forest had rules, and anyone who broke those rules would face the consequences. As the group read through the faded pages of the journal, the air grew heavier. The message became clear. The forest did not give up its secrets easily. The group felt a sense of foreboding, a feeling that they were being watched. They realized that they had disturbed the forest's peace, and now they had to face the consequences. The journal's warning echoed in their minds. Respect the forest, or face its wrath. The group knew they had to be careful, or they would suffer the same fate as the earlier travelers. They felt a sense of fear, knowing that they were not alone in the forest. As the group thought about the ominous warnings from the journal, they started to feel tense. They began to disagree about what the warnings meant. Marcus believed that there had to be logical explanations for the strange things that were happening. He said that nature could be unusual and unpredictable. On the other hand, Lily and Olivia were more cautious. They felt that something supernatural was going on. They worried that the forest was alive and watching them. This thought sent shivers down their spines. Ethan found himself stuck in the middle. He listened to both sides without saying a word. His eyes showed that he was struggling to understand everything that was happening. As the group continued to discuss the warnings, their unity began to fall apart. Fear and uncertainty took over, causing them to start accusing each other. They wondered if one of their own friends might be causing the strange disturbances. Each member of the group started to feel alone and isolated. It was as if the forest was making their deepest fears and doubts worse. Trust started to disappear, making it hard for them to rely on each other. The group's bond, which had once been strong, began to break. Clear paths and trust became hard to find, replaced by suspicion and mistrust. The forest seemed to be driving them apart, testing their resolve and their friendship. The group's dynamics had changed. They were no longer a united team, working together to survive. Instead, they were individuals, each with their own fears and doubts. The forest had become a catalyst for their deepest worries, and it seemed to be enjoying their suffering. That fateful night, when the fire had burned down to small, glowing embers, something unthinkable happened. The group had been sitting in silence, feeling uneasy and anxious. Suddenly, Sarah vanished into thin air. Her tent was empty, the zipper left half open as if she had been taken away while she was sleeping. The only sign that she had been there was a lone shoe, stained with mud and something darker. This sight sent a chill down their spines. Panic set in immediately. The remaining friends rushed out into the cool darkness, calling Sarah's name and shining their flashlights into the forest. They hoped that she would answer, that she would come running back to them, but there was only silence. Their voices echoed through the trees, but there was no response. The only sounds were the whisper of leaves and the soft crunch of underbrush. These sounds made them feel like they were being watched, like something was lurking just out of sight. The disappearance felt like a deliberate act, a message from the forest itself. It was as if the forest was warning them to fear every step, to be constantly on guard against its dangers. The friends felt like they were trapped in a nightmare, with no escape in sight. They were shocked and terrified. They had never expected Sarah to vanish like that. They felt lost and alone, unsure of what to do next. As they stood there, frozen with fear, the forest seemed to grow darker and more menacing. The trees seemed to loom over them, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. The friends knew they had to do something, but they didn't know what. They were trapped with no clear path forward. The forest seemed to be closing in around them, and they didn't know how to escape. The group was determined to find Sarah. They spread out through the dark forest, shining their flashlights to light up the darkness. Every small sound made them jump. They were scared, but they kept moving forward, They followed the trail that Sarah had left behind. They saw small signs of disturbance in the undergrowth, broken branches, and strange symbols carved into the bark of ancient trees. These symbols looked like the ones they had found in the journal. As they walked, the trees seemed to close in around them. They felt trapped and scared, but they didn't give up. They kept moving forward, determined to find Sarah. After a while, they came to a clearing that was lit up by the moon. In the center of the clearing, they found a small makeshift altar. It was made of stones and twigs. The altar had the same symbols carved into it that they had found in the journal. On the altar, they found a piece of fabric that belonged to Sarah. This made them even more scared. They realized that the forest was not just a place. It was a force that was controlling events. It was like the forest was playing a game with them. The group felt like they were in great danger. They knew they had to get out of the forest as fast as they could, but they couldn't leave Sarah behind. They had to find her. As they stood there, frozen with fear, they heard a strange noise. It sounded like someone was watching them. The group knew they had to be brave if they wanted to survive. They took a deep breath and tried to think clearly. What should they do next? Should they keep searching for Sarah or try to find a way out of the forest? They knew they had to make a decision quickly before it was too late. As the days turned into nights, the group felt a growing sense of tension. They started to realize that they were not alone in the forest. A presence began to reveal itself, but it was not a loud or obvious presence. Instead, it was a silent stalker that haunted the edges of their vision. In the dim light, they caught quick glimpses of something. They would see a pair of eyes reflecting back at them from behind a gnarled tree, or a vague silhouette lurking in the heavy mist. These glimpses were fleeting, but they left a lasting sense of unease. Lily felt the presence most strongly. She would lie awake in her tent at night, sensing that the entity was watching her. She felt like it was not just observing her, but also calculating and learning her fears and vulnerabilities. It was as if the entity was studying her, trying to understand what made her tick. The forest around them seemed to be closing in. The air felt thick with anticipation, like something was waiting to happen. Each night, the silent stalker seemed to edge closer, its presence a cold and unyielding reminder of the forest's dark intent. The group knew that they were being stalked, but they didn't know what was stalking them. They didn't know what its intentions were, or what it was capable of. All they knew was that they felt a growing sense of fear and unease, and that they were trapped in the forest with something that didn't want them there. As the nights wore on, the group's fear turned to paranoia. They started to suspect each other of being the silent stalker. They didn't know who to trust or what to believe. The forest seemed to be playing tricks on their minds, making them question their own sanity. The silent stalker was a master of psychological warfare. It knew exactly how to play on the group's fears and vulnerabilities. It was a patient hunter, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and the group knew that they were running out of time. The night wore on, feeling like an eternity. The darkness was so thick and heavy that it seemed to swallow everything around them, including the stars in the sky. It was as if the night itself was a living, breathing entity, and it was determined to make the group suffer. One by one, the remaining friends experienced a night of unspeakable horror. Olivia was jolted awake by heavy, measured footsteps circling her tent. The sound was deliberate and menacing, making her feel like she was being stalked by a predator. Marcus heard a low, guttural sound just beyond the fabric of his shelter. The sound was primal and terrifying, making him feel like he was in grave danger. It was as if something was trying to get to him, but it was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The forest itself became a labyrinth of terror. Unseen forces toyed with their minds, making them question what was real and what was not. Doors that should have been locked swung open, making them feel like they were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. Shadows danced in impossible patterns, making it seem like the forest was alive and moving. The constant murmur of whispers crescendoed into an almost deafening chorus, making it hard for them to think clearly. Their collective terror reached a peak as the presence made itself unmistakably known. It was an inky, amorphous shape that moved silently among the trees, stalking them with malicious intent. The shape was like nothing they had ever seen before, and it filled them with a sense of dread. The group knew that they were in grave danger. They were being stalked by something that was determined to harm them, and they didn't know how to escape. They were trapped in the forest, at the mercy of a malevolent force that seemed to be toying with them. As the night wore on, the group's terror only intensified. They knew that they had to find a way out of the forest, but they didn't know where to start. They were lost, scared, and completely at the mercy of the forest. The group's fear was palpable, and it seemed to feed the forest's energy. The trees seemed to loom over them, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. The wind rustled through the leaves, creating an unsettling whisper that seemed to carry a menacing message. The group knew that they had to stay together if they wanted to survive. But as the night wore on, they began to suspect that one of their own might be working against them. The seeds of mistrust were sown, and the group's unity began to fracture. As the darkness closed in around them, the group realized that they were facing a terror beyond their wildest imagination. They were trapped in a living nightmare, and they didn't know if they would ever wake up. In the aftermath of that harrowing night, the survivors gathered what little strength they had left. They were physically and emotionally exhausted, but they knew they had to keep moving forward. With the trembling hands and heavy hearts, they began to search for any further clues that might help them understand the forest's curse. Their exploration led them to a small clearing where the earth had been recently disturbed. The ground was uneven, and the trees seemed to lean in, as if they were trying to listen to the group's conversations. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and the group could feel the weight of the forest's history bearing down on them. Digging carefully, they uncovered relics of past wanderers, personal effects, faded photographs, and cryptic carvings on weathered stone. The symbols etched into the soil and stone echoed those found in the cabin's journal. It was clear that the forest had a long history of claiming lives and secrets. The group realized that they were not the first ones to venture into the forest, and they were not the first ones to suffer. They were part of a long line of people who had been drawn into the forest's depths, never to return. This realization was both terrifying and humbling. With each discovery, the oppressive weight of the ancient curse deepened. The group felt like they were uncovering a dark history that was meant to remain buried. They realized that the forest was not simply a passive backdrop to their ordeal. It was a living tapestry of lost souls and unspeakable horrors. The forest seemed to be a repository of secrets, a place where the past and present converged. The group felt like they were unraveling a mystery that was meant to remain unsolved. With each step, they felt like they were being pulled deeper into the forest's grasp, further into the heart of the curse. The relics they found were a testament to the forest's power. They were a reminder that the group was not alone, that they were part of a long line of people who had ventured into the forest and never returned. The group realized that they had to be careful, that they had to uncover the secrets of the forest before it was too late. As they delved deeper into the forest's secrets, the group began to realize that they were in a desperate fight for survival. They were up against a force that was ancient, malevolent, and seemingly unstoppable. But they refused to give up, refused to surrender to the forest's curse. They were determined to uncover the truth, no matter what the cost. As hope began to dwindle, fate delivered one final desperate message. Hidden among the scattered relics in the abandoned cabin was a diary whose final entry was a heartfelt plea for escape. The words, scribbled in shaky script and stained with the patina of time, seemed to reverberate through the quiet room like a death knell. Leave now, or be claimed by the whispering wild, the diary warned. The curse lives, and so must you if you value your soul. These words, penned by a previous victim of the forest's curse, resonated deeply with the group. They felt an almost palpable shift in the air, as if the forest itself had paused to listen, waiting for their next move. The diary served as both a grim reminder of the danger that lurked around them and a beacon of possibility, a slim chance that understanding the curse might offer them a way to break it. With heavy hearts and determined minds, they resolved that they must try to escape, even if it meant confronting the darkness head-on. The group knew that their chances of survival were slim, but they also knew that they had to try. They couldn't just sit back and wait for the forest to claim them. They had to take action, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. This sense of determination was fueled by their desire to survive, to overcome the curse and emerge victorious. As they stood there, surrounded by the eerie silence of the forest, they felt a sense of resolve wash over them. They knew that they were in for the fight of their lives, but they were ready. They were ready to face whatever horrors the forest had in store for them, and they were ready to fight for their survival. With a newfound sense of determination, the group set out to uncover the secrets of the forest. They scoured the cabin and its surroundings, searching for any clues that might lead them to freedom. They examined every inch of the cabin, searching for hidden compartments or secret messages. As they searched, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the forest was waiting for them to make their next move. They felt like they were trapped in a game of cat and mouse, with the forest as the predator and them as the prey. But they refused to give up. They refused to let the forest win. With every step, they felt a sense of defiance rising up within them. They were determined to survive, to overcome the curse and emerge victorious. And so, with a newfound sense of determination, they pressed on, ready to face whatever lay ahead. With the diary's ominous warning still echoing in their ears, the survivors steeled themselves for a desperate bid for freedom. At first light, they gathered their meager belongings and set out along what they hoped was the path to escape. Every step was heavy with foreboding, yet also fueled by a fierce determination to reclaim their lives. The forest, however, seemed to have other plans. No matter which direction they chose, the landscape appeared to twist and fold back upon itself, like a living, breathing entity determined to keep them trapped. Familiar landmarks were replaced by impenetrable thickets, and every turn led to a dead end. It was as if the forest itself was a sentient being, deliberately manipulating the terrain to ensnare them within its labyrinthine grasp. The survivors' sense of disorientation and confusion deepened with every step as they struggled to make sense of the ever-shifting landscape. Their escape attempt, instead of offering relief, only served to deepen the chilling realization that the forest would not let them leave without a fight. The group's initial determination began to give way to despair as they faced the daunting reality of their predicament. The forest seemed to be toying with them, drawing them deeper into its heart with every failed attempt at escape. The survivors' sense of hope began to dwindle, replaced by a creeping sense of dread that threatened to consume them whole. As the day wore on, the group's exhaustion began to take its toll. Their legs ached, their minds reeled, and their spirits sagged. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming despair, they refused to give up. They knew that their only hope lay in finding a way out of the forest, no matter how impossible it seemed. With a deepening sense of resolve, they steeled themselves for the next stage of their ordeal, determined to outwit the forest and escape its deadly grasp. As they trudged on, the forest seemed to grow denser, the shadows deepening into dark, foreboding pools. The survivors' senses were on high alert, their hearts pounding in their chests, as they strained to hear any sound that might signal their escape. But the forest remained silent, its secrets locked deep within its ancient, twisted heart. The survivors were left to face the darkness alone, their only comfort the faint, flickering flame of hope that still burned within them. Cornered and desperate, the remaining survivors gathered what little courage they could muster. In a clearing illuminated by the weak, fading light of dusk, they devised a last stand. The air was heavy with tension, and the weight of their desperation hung over them like a dark cloud, threatening to consume them whole. Using the cryptic clues from the diary and the relics they had uncovered, they prepared a makeshift barrier around their camp. The barrier was a symbol of their defiance, a declaration that they would not go quietly into the night. It was a testament to their determination to survive, to overcome the ancient curse that had haunted the forest for so long. With trembling hands, they scattered protective symbols carved from sticks and stones, hoping to invoke a power greater than their terror. These symbols were more than just a desperate attempt to ward off the evil that surrounded them. They were a manifestation of their deepest hopes and fears, a tangible representation of their desire to survive. Each symbol was imbued with a sense of hope, a sense that they might somehow, against all odds, manage to escape the forest's deadly grasp. They were a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light, always a chance for redemption and salvation. As the shadows lengthened and the silent stalker drew nearer, the tension reached its breaking point. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, as if it too were waiting to see what would happen next. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the weight of their fear. In that moment of impending confrontation, every whispered memory of lost friends and every fearful heartbeat became fuel for their determination. They were no longer just victims, cowering in the face of an ancient evil. They were fighters, ready to challenge the curse with every ounce of their being. Their determination was not just about survival. It was about defiance. It was about refusing to give in to the fear that had haunted them for so long. They were ready to face whatever horrors the forest had in store for them, ready to confront the silent stalker and shatter the curse that had held them captive for so long. As they stood there, waiting for the inevitable, they felt a sense of pride and purpose that they had not felt in days. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, ready to face whatever lay ahead with courage and determination. In that moment, they knew that they had found something within themselves that they never knew they had. A deep well of strength and resilience that would carry them through even the darkest of times. They were ready to face their fears head on, to confront the evil that had haunted them for so long, and to emerge victorious in the end. With the final confrontation underway, the survivors put their risky plan into action. Guided by the cryptic instructions in the diary, they began a ritual in the center of their protective circle. The ritual was a delicate balance of ancient words, gestures, and intentions, all carefully crafted to challenge the curse that had held them captive for so long. As they recited fragments of old words, calling upon the forces of nature and the memory of those who had been lost to the forest's curse, the air grew charged with anticipation. The ground trembled beneath their feet, as if the forest itself were shifting, awakening from a deep slumber. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches dangling together in a macabre dance. The silent stalker materialized before them, a swirling mass of shadow and malice that seemed to coalesce from the very darkness itself. Its presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a palpable manifestation of the curse that had haunted them for so long. In the midst of the ritual, the survivors' voices rose in unison, echoing through the clearing with a haunting, ethereal quality. The sound was both beautiful and terrifying, a symphony of hope and despair that seemed to capture the very essence of their struggle. Light and darkness clashed in a moment of spectral brilliance. As the curse was challenged head-on, the struggle was both physical and spiritual, a desperate battle to reclaim their lives from an ancient, indifferent power that had held them captive for so long. The air was filled with an otherworldly energy, a palpable force that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The survivors felt themselves being lifted out of their bodies, transported to a realm beyond the physical world. They saw visions of the past and present, echoes of memories that were not their own. As they gazed into the abyss of the unknown, they realized that the curse was not just a simple spell, but a complex web of energies and intentions that had been woven together over centuries. They saw the faces of those who had been consumed by the curse, their spirits trapped in a never-ending cycle of suffering. Slowly, imperceptibly, the oppressive force began to recede. The curse, which had held them captive for so long, began to weaken, its hold on them faltering. The survivors felt a sense of hope rising within them, a sense that they might finally be free from the forest's deadly grasp. As the ritual reached its climax, the survivors felt themselves being pulled back into their bodies, back into the physical world. They opened their eyes to find that the silent stalker had vanished by the power of their combined voices and the ancient words of the ritual. The forest, which had seemed so menacing and oppressive just moments before, now seemed quiet, still. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches no longer dangling together in a macabre dance. The survivors felt a sense of peace settle over them, a sense that they had finally broken free from the curse that had haunted them for so long. As they stood there, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, they knew that they had been forever changed by their experience. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, their spirits tempered by the fires of adversity. They knew that they would never forget the horrors they had faced in the forest, but they also knew that they would never be held captive by fear again. As the first rays of dawn broke through the forest canopy, a quiet calm fell over the clearing, like a soothing balm spreading its gentle warmth over the survivors' battered souls. The oppressive tension that had defined the previous night, with its suffocating grip of fear and uncertainty, melted away into the soft golden hues of morning, like a dark veil lifted from their eyes. The survivors, exhausted yet relieved, stepped out from their circle of protection, blinking in the bright light of a new day. The forest, now bathed in the gentle light of dawn, seemed almost benign, its sinister whispers subdued, if not entirely silenced. The trees, once twisted and menacing, now stood tall and still, their branches etched against the sky like a delicate pen and ink drawing. As they made their way through the woods, following a path that had miraculously cleared under the soft glow of the sunrise, the survivors felt a sense of hope rising within them, like a phoenix from the ashes. Though haunted by the memories of what they had endured, they clung to the hope that this day signified a new beginning, a chance to leave the horrors of the forest behind and start anew. The oppressive maze of the forest, which had seemed so impenetrable, so deliberately designed to confound and terrify, had finally loosened its grip, offering them the promise of escape and renewal. The survivors felt a sense of liberation wash over them, as if they had been freed from a long and terrible captivity. As they walked, the light of the sun casting long shadows behind them, they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had faced in the forest. But they also knew that they had been forever changed by their experience, tempered by the fires of adversity, and strengthened by their determination to survive. The forest, once a place of darkness and terror, had become a catalyst for transformation, a crucible in which they had been tested and refined. As they emerged from the trees, blinking in the bright light of day, they knew that they would carry the lessons of the forest with them always, a reminder of the strength and resilience that lay within them, waiting to be tapped. In this moment, they realized that their experience in the forest had been a journey of self-discovery, a testament to the human spirit's capacity for survival and growth. They had faced their deepest fears and had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever before. As they stepped out of the forest, they felt a sense of renewal, a sense that they had been given a second chance at life. They knew that they would never forget the forest, but they also knew that they would never be held captive by its darkness again. They had been set free, and they were ready to start anew. The city was a far cry from the endless maze of trees that had nearly consumed them. Towering buildings replaced the ancient pines. Neon lights flickered where fireflies once danced, and the ceaseless hum of traffic drowned out the eerie silence they had fought to escape. Yet, despite the comforting embrace of civilization, none of them truly felt at home anymore. The forest had left its mark, not in visible wounds, but in the silent echoes that refused to fade. In the weeks following their return, they tried to stitch their lives back together, Marcus threw himself into work, drowning his thoughts in numbers and deadlines. Lily spent hours at a time in her studio, painting scenes of shadowy landscapes and figures that only half revealed themselves. Ethan, ever the quiet observer, found himself staring into reflective surfaces, windows, mirrors, puddles, half expecting to see something lurking just behind him. Olivia, the most practical of them all, tried to rationalize their experiences, reading books on psychological trauma, folklore, and survival instincts. Yet no amount of logic could erase what they had felt. At night, when the world slowed and silence stretched across their bedrooms, the whispers would return, faint, almost imperceptible, like wind slipping through a crack in the wall. A hushed murmur that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. At first, they convinced themselves it was their imagination, residual paranoia from their ordeal, but the feeling persisted. It was never loud, never distinct, just a presence, a soft suggestion that they had left something behind, or that something had followed them home. They clung to small rituals, things that made them feel grounded. Morning cups of tea in the warmth of the sun, long walks through city parks, moments of quiet companionship where no words were needed. These habits became lifelines, tethers to the normalcy they desperately craved. When together, the whispers seemed too dull, retreating to the corners of their consciousness. But when alone, each of them felt it, the weight of the unseen, the sense that the forest had not truly let them go. Lily, always the most attuned to the intangible, felt it strongest. She would wake in the middle of the night to the sensation of being watched, though her apartment was empty. Sometimes she swore she caught glimpses of movement in the periphery of her vision, shadows shifting in ways they shouldn't. One evening, as she stood by her window staring at the city skyline, she whispered to no one in particular, "Are you still there?" The air was still. The hum of distant traffic filled the space where a response should have been. She exhaled, half laughing at her own foolishness, shaking her head. But just as she turned away, she heard it. A sigh. Soft, barely there. A whisper carried on the wind. She didn't turn back. She didn't need to. The others felt it too, in their own ways. Marcus, in the way his dreams always led him back to the clearing. Olivia, in the way her radio sometimes crackled with static at odd hours. Ethan, in the way reflections sometimes held shapes that shouldn't exist. None of them spoke about it, not directly, but in quiet moments when they met for coffee or took long walks together. Their conversations always danced around the truth. They had escaped the forest. They had survived. But something of it had woven itself into them, threading through their minds like roots burrowing deep into the earth. They had broken the curse, but the forest was eternal. It did not forget, and neither would they.